Welcome to the video. Tonight, we'll follow the path of a forgotten rider, a figure once vital to an empire, yet nearly invisible to history. You might not know their name, but they carried words that shaped the world. In this quiet, moonlit journey through Mongol China, you'll come to understand what it meant to be a courier on the Great Khan's roads. As you settle into bed and the distractions of the day slip away, picture yourself in a different time. The year is sometime in the late 13th century. The Mongol Empire, forged by Genghis Khan and expanded by his descendants, stretches from the cold rivers of Russia to the warm coasts of China. The Silk Road is alive with merchants and monks, soldiers and spies, but threading through it all are the couriers. They are the empire's lifeline, galloping through deserts, frozen valleys, and treacherous steppes. They carry not just scrolls and orders, but secrets, alliances, and threats. Their saddlebags are heavier than they seem. But this isn't a story of glory or honor. This is about exhaustion, about frostbite and fear, about what it felt like to live for the message while knowing that failure might mean disappearance, punishment, or simply never being spoken of again. In this tour journey, we'll travel in 8 parts, beginning with a single cold morning somewhere in the eastern steppe. From there, we'll trace the endless routes, the shifting dangers, the superstitions of the riders, and the luxurious courts where their words eventually arrived. The ride is long, but you don't have to rush. You can simply listen, imagine, and let the steady rhythm of history guide you toward sleep. Let's begin. Imagine it now. You lie on the ground, not quite asleep, not quite awake. The world is still dark and cold. Not the kind of cold that simply stings your fingers or makes your breath curl in front of you in mist. No, this is a deeper cold, one that seeps into your bones and lingers, even beneath your sheepskin cloak, even beneath the thin blanket you carry, carefully folded to conserve warmth. The kind of cold that settles in the joints of your knees and stiffens your fingers, making even the thought of movement an effort. The earth beneath you is hard-packed, uneven, and unforgiving. There is no bedroll too bulky to carry, no tent too much weight, just the rough ground of the steppe, scattered with frost-covered roots and flattened grass, half-frozen mud caked with the hoofprints of your horse, and the shadowy remnants of your own restless shifting through the night. Above you, the sky is still a blanket of dark ink. A few pale stars linger in the far corners of the heavens, unwilling to surrender just yet to the inevitable approach of dawn. You blink up at them with dry eyes, eyes that sting from smoke, dust, and wind. It's always the wind. Even when it stops for a moment, you can still feel it like a memory etched into your skin, tugging invisibly at your clothing, needling its way into your ears, under your collar, between the seams of your boots. You don't remember what it felt like to wake in a bed. That life is far behind you now, if it ever existed at all. You are a courier in the service of the Mongol Empire, and you've grown used to waking, not when you're ready, but when the road demands it. The job doesn't wait, the horses don't wait, and certainly the Khan doesn't wait. Your body aches in familiar ways. There's a stiffness behind your shoulder blades that never goes away, not since the time you fell asleep in the saddle and were thrown against a low branch. Your thighs burn with chafed skin, rubbed raw by the relentless movement of riding day after day, hour after hour. Even when you stop, the soreness lingers, like an echo of all the places you've been. Your right heel feels bruised again, likely from jamming against the stirrup worked too hard during yesterday's climb up the rocky ridge. Still, you move slowly, deliberately. You've learned not to rush. Rushing leads to missing things. A loose buckle, an untied pouch, a forgotten loop in the saddlebag. Small mistakes turn into big ones on the open step. A lost scroll, a snapped strap, a missing water skin, one of them can cost you your life. You sit up with a groan that only the wind hears. Your cloak is stiff with frost where your breath collected in the night. You pull it tighter around your shoulders, then unwrap the inner fold of fabric that holds your satchel, the reason for your entire existence. Inside is the message, sealed with wax and wrapped in oiled cloth to keep the dampness out. You check it with careful fingers, tracing the edges, confirming the seal is still intact. You do this every morning and several times a day. You've long stopped wondering what the message says. It isn't your place to know. But the wax bears the crest of an important house, one that speaks directly to the court in Kanbalik, capital of the Yuan dynasty. That alone is enough to give it weight. You've carried messages from lesser lords before, petitions, reports, accusations, veiled in courtly language. But this one is different. This one matters. A few feet away, your horse shifts its weight, snorting softly as it shakes frost from its mane. You glance over, relieved to see it still alert. Too many mornings have begun with silence from the spot where your mount should be, only to find hoofprints leading away, or worse, signs of wolves in the night. Horses are currency here. If yours is stolen, lame or dead, your mission dies with it. You approach with slow steps, muttering under your breath in the lilting dialect of the northern steppes. It isn't quite a language of comfort. No one speaks softly to horses here, but it helps to keep them calm, to remind them of your presence, your hand, your scent. You check the tack, you check the hooves. You feed it the last of your pressed grain cakes, broken into small pieces and offered palm up. The animal chews without gratitude. Your own stomach knots with hunger. You haven't eaten since the stale dumpling offered by a half-asleep innkeeper 4 days ago. The next relay station might have food, it might not. You've stopped hoping. The saddle goes on stiffly. The leather is cracked from the dry air, and the strap under your horse's belly resists the cold like a board. You mount with care, wincing slightly as the raw skin between your legs protests. The position is always the same. The discomfort never leaves, but the road calls, and there's still 100 miles ahead of you before you're due to change horses. You click your tongue, and the horse begins to move, hooves muffled by the frost-hardened grass. The path is not marked. There are no signs, no posts, no maps. Only memory and the ghosts of hoofbeats long faded into the land. The sun has not yet risen, but your eyes adjust to the half-light easily. You've trained yourself to see the faint dips in the land, the curves where the wind shapes the earth in long, sweeping strokes. As the hours pass, the cold gives way not to warmth, but to damp. The frost melts into slick mud, clinging to your boots, weighing down your cloak. You ride in silence, save for the occasional grunt of the horse or the rustle of your gear. You do not sing, as some couriers do. You do not speak aloud. You conserve every ounce of strength for the miles ahead. When the sun finally peaks above the horizon, it offers no comfort. Its light is weak, diluted by the high-altitude haze that never seems to clear. Still, you are grateful for its presence, if only because it means one fewer hour of darkness. By mid-morning, Your legs are numb again. You dismount to walk, leading the horse by its reins. The mud sucks at your boots with every step. Somewhere in the distance, you hear a distant howl. Wolf, perhaps, or wind. The two often sound alike in the emptiness. You check the sky, searching for the familiar curve of a hawk's wings or the shape of a cloud that resembles a known omen. The couriers all watch the sky. The old men say it tells you things: when to push forward, when to turn back, when to stay hidden. You don't believe in omens, not entirely, but sometimes you still pause when the clouds shift in a strange way. Your fingers tighten around the reins. You haven't passed another person in days. That is both a blessing and a curse. The step can be mercifully quiet or dangerously empty. No one to help, no one to bear witness. Only you, your horse, and the words you carry. You stop for a moment beside a low stone marker, half buried in dirt. It's older than the Khan's rule, perhaps, worn smooth by weather and centuries. Some believe these stones are sacred. Others believe they mark the graves of those who carried messages and never returned. You don't know. You don't stop to pray, but you do rest your palm on its surface, just briefly, before moving on. The day stretches endlessly ahead, and yet it has only just begun. This is how it starts every time, with silence, with soreness, with the long breath before another ride. No one will thank you, no one will remember you, but the message must be delivered, even if it costs you everything. There is a moment, perhaps 15 minutes after every morning begins, when the rhythm returns. It begins as a sensation, a quiet alignment of breath and movement. Your shoulders relax, the reins settle in your hands, and your thighs, bruised though they are, find a familiar balance in the saddle's worn curves. The pain doesn't vanish, but it fades into the background, a hum in the body's deeper layers. This is the rhythm of the courier, the quiet tempo of someone who has become a moving part of a vast machine. You lean slightly forward in the saddle. Your weight shifts without thought. The horse responds instinctively. Together, the two of you stretch across the steprider and beast, driven by duty, pulled by obligation, and barely noticed by the world through which you pass. To your left, a small cluster of trees stands hunched in the cold wind, their bare branches clinking against one another like old bones. You do not stop. You have not stopped to admire a tree in years. There is nothing in nature that slows you unless it blocks the way. Beauty exists, surely, but it is for others, not for the courier. Your eyes scan the distant horizon. Mongol couriers are trained from youth to see at great distances, to notice faint movement, abnormal shapes in the terrain, smoke that doesn't belong, flickers of shadow where nothing should cast one. These skills save lives. They've saved yours more than once. You're looking for the next marker now, a low ridge of stone, perhaps, or the leaning wooden pole set at an angle near the frozen stream. You don't use maps, not because they don't exist. Maps do exist, and you've seen them, pinned to the walls of relay stations and stashed in the bags of wealthier riders, but they are rarely accurate. Routes change with the seasons. Bridges collapse. Roads turn to bog. Bandits establish new ambush points. What matters most is memory and instinct. Your own path is a thread woven from many rides before, from orders half forgotten, from trails others have taken and whispered about in low voices over lukewarm bowls of broth. You ride not just forward in space, but backward through experience, tracing again and again the contours of a world that does not care whether you make it to the end. The land begins to rise slowly beneath your horse's hooves. A long, inclined slope, more felt than seen. Each step demands a little more of your mount. You notice the breath coming harder now, the way its chest expands with effort. The saddle creaks faintly with each stride. You whisper to the horse, words of encouragement so low they vanish in the wind. You learned long ago to respect the animal more than most riders do. Without it, you are not only slow, you are helpless. Walking would turn a one-day journey into 3. The Empire doesn't allow for delays. The horse slows slightly, and you allow it. Pushing too hard now will mean disaster later. You reach into your bag and retrieve a folded scrap of cloth soaked in vinegar and herbs. Not to eat, there is little to eat, but to press against your lips and inhale. A ritual, a habit. It masks the scent of your own sweat and keeps your senses sharp. You've done it every morning since you started. As you climb higher, the landscape unfolds in waves. To the west, the pale line of a frozen river winds like a ribbon. To the east, hills rise like slumbering giants, dotted here and there with tufts of dead grass, stubborn and wiry. There are no structures, no walls or homes or hearths, just the land and the sky, both of them empty and enormous. Above, a hawk circles slowly. You follow its arc with your eyes, watching as it dips and rises with the wind. Some say the hawk is the messenger of Tengri, the eternal blue sky. Others say it is just a bird. You've never decided which belief comforts you more, but you bow your head slightly as it passes overhead, out of habit more than faith. The silence of the morning is not total. Your ears catch every sound, and you've trained yourself to sort them without thinking. The soft exhale of your horse, the irregular thump of its hooves on thawing earth, the distant groan of ice cracking beneath a buried stream, a pebble tumbling from a slope you didn't touch. That last one makes you pause. You stop the horse with a light pull on the reins. It obeys immediately, nostrils flaring. You listen, nothing. You wait longer than most would, 10 slow breaths, then 15. You watch the trees for movement, the hillsides for signs of dust or a shimmer of cloth. You know the tricks of ambush, a false herd, a rock that glints where it shouldn't, the angle of a spear tip behind a bush. Still nothing, but you don't relax. You ride again, but slower, more cautiously. The message must get through. But there is no glory in dying over a false route. By the time you descend into the shallow valley, the sun is fully risen, though not warm. The wind sharpens again, cutting through your layers. You lower your face into your cloak and let your mind drift for a moment. Just a moment. You think of the relay station ahead, if it still stands. Some are permanent structures, sturdy wooden outposts built along major routes. Others are little more than yurts or tents hastily erected beside a water source. You've arrived at more than one station to find it abandoned, the supplies gone, the guard posts empty. Once you found a station burned, the ashes still warm, the message from its last courier nailed to a tree with an iron spike. You didn't touch it. You just turned and rode north, found a new route, and said nothing. There's no reward for speaking of burned stations. The path now follows the curve of a low ridge, and you guide your horse along it carefully. The rocks are slick from melting frost. You do not want a slip here not, with the drop to the right so steep. The Empire does not look kindly on accidents. Horses are tracked, riders expected. A fall is not just misfortune, it is a failure. As you cross the ridge, a sudden gust of wind catches your hood and flings it back. You let it go. No use fighting the weather, it always wins. Instead, you press onward, thinking now of the way station's fire, if it has one, of the possible bowl of millet soup, of the long hours you'll sit without speaking, boots drying by the door, eyes staring at a wall made of earth and felt. These small comforts are what your world revolves around. Warmth, soup, sleep that doesn't come with the ache of damp bones. By midday, the sun is high, though it brings no heat. The clouds have gathered again, pale and woolly, hanging like low ceilings over the landscape. A snow squall might come later. You press your legs gently into your horse's sides, urging a faster pace. Best to reach the station before the storm breaks. The steppe seems to stretch forever, but you know its landmarks. You know where the hills flatten and the scrub turns to moss. You know where the deer tracks cross the path. You know when the smell of dung in the wind tells you other riders passed recently days ago, perhaps, but recently. You know that you are part of a living chainmen and women, young and old, moving east and west, north and south, all with satchels like yours, all with messages too important to wait. Some carry war orders, others treaties, still others confessions, payments, demands, secrets, threats, lies. You've carried all of them, though you've never read a single one. Your fingers grow stiff again. You flex them around the reins. The cold doesn't leave, but you are used to that now. This life has no comfort, only function. You ride not because it is noble, but because someone must. The day drags onward. You ride, you watch, you breathe. At last, far in the distance, you see the glint of a low roof, barely more than a shadow against the flat horizon. The station, or what's left of it. Your pace quickens, not with joy, but with anticipation. A place to rest, a place to refill your pouch, a place to pass the message to the next rider, if the schedule allows. As you approach, you do not wave, you do not call out, you ride in silence, alert, until you are close enough to see the outline of a figure standing near the door, wrapped in furs, watching you just as cautiously. Another rider, perhaps, or a guard, it does not matter. The sun is past its peak now, and your morning has lasted longer than most days. But for a courier in Mongol China, this is how every morning begins, frozen, silent, and endless. By the time the station disappears behind you, reduced once more to a dot in the vastness, the day has already begun its slow descent toward dusk. You have changed horses, the new one, leaner, faster, less familiar, and replenished your rations with a few small parcels of dried barley and a skin of water sealed with waxed cloth. There was no fire lit at the station, only the faint heat from a covered brazier and a hollow-eyed station keeper who nodded once, silently, before passing you the sealed packet that joins your own in the satchel. You were given no instructions, only a look that suggested urgency and the unspoken understanding that whatever message was inside must not arrive late. The horse beneath you moves differently now, with sharper steps and occasional flares of resistance in its breath. It does not know you, and you do not know it. Trust will come only with distance, with time and sweat and the shared rhythm of miles. Until then, you ride carefully, keeping one hand close to the reins. The weight of the messages has not changed, but their presence feels heavier with every league you travel, as though the Empire's pressure rides with you, silent and unrelenting. The steppe unfolds once more in every direction, a landscape too vast to measure and too quiet to challenge. There are no walls, no fences, only the slight undulations of the earth and the occasional ripple of dry grasses that bend toward the wind, like listeners bowing to a speaker they cannot see. You ride into that wind, eyes half-lidded against the chill, your cloak whipping softly behind you like a loose banner. There are no signs to mark your progress, no milestones or wayfarers to measure your pace against. The only indicators are internal: the ache in your legs, the dryness in your throat, the feel of your horse's gait growing more rhythmic or more strained. Sometimes the ground changes. One moment the soil is firm and golden, speckled with sharp stones and scattered bones of forgotten animals. The next it turns dark and sticky, thick with moisture from some unseen spring. You grow attuned to these shifts over time. You learn to read the signs. When hoofbeats suddenly dull, you know the terrain has softened. When birds take flight without sound, you know something larger may be moving nearby. These instincts are your true compass. They tell you when to slow, when to press on, and when to veer slightly off course to avoid a hidden gully or a stretch of land that drinks too eagerly from the hooves of passing riders. Time becomes elastic. Hours pass like clouds overhead, some thick and slow, others thin and barely noticeable. You try not to think about the distance in terms of days, because days stretch too long in the mind. Instead, you think in intervals between stations, in remembered sights, and subtle shifts in the air that tell you how far you've come. There is the stretch of plain where the grass grows oddly straight, always pointing northeast. There is the bent tree, blackened by lightning, that marks the halfway point to the next outpost. There is the ridge of red earth that runs like a scar across the land, dry and brittle as old parchment. These landmarks become a language, a quiet vocabulary only couriers know. You pass the halfway marker just as the sun begins to fall. It is a long stone, carved by wind and time into a rough column, half buried and leaning slightly eastward. You do not stop, but you nod to it as you always do. Some riders whisper prayers as they pass, others spit. You simply acknowledge it's an old companion in a landscape that offers little else in the way of familiarity. You wonder, briefly, how many other couriers have passed this same stone over the years, how many messages it has seen hurtling by, unread and unspoken, bound for destinations beyond even its ancient understanding. The light begins to fade. Dusk comes early in the highlands, and shadows stretch across the plain like lazy animals curling in the hollows and crests. The wind picks up again, sharper now, with the chill of oncoming night hidden in its breath. You tighten your cloak and adjust your gloves, flexing your fingers against the reins to keep them warm. The horse snorts once, as if responding, and you murmur a few words to it, not for meaning, but for presence. A voice in the darkness helps you both remember you are not alone. You begin to feel the first true edge of exhaustion, just as the last light slips behind the distant hills. It arrives not as a sudden wave, but as a quiet dulling of sensation, your legs becoming numb to the saddle. Your arms heavy, your eyes dry and slow to blink. It is not new. This is the shape of your days. Weariness always arrives. What matters is whether you let it slow you. You press on, not quickly, but with steady determination, your posture stiffening to resist the pull of sleep that hovers just behind your eyes. There is no moon yet, only starlight, faint and scattered, filtering down like distant dust from above. You light no torch. To do so would mark your path too clearly. And though the Empire claims mastery of the roads, the darkness still belongs to others, bandits, deserters, creatures that hunt without name. You ride in shadow, letting the natural curve of the land guide your path, your horse's hooves muffled by the softness of dusk-chilled earth. The silence deepens around you, broken only by the occasional rustle of grass or the distant cry of a bird disturbed in its sleep. And then a change, subtle but real. The air carries a smell, faint but distinct, burnt wood and boiled millet, damp wool and horse sweat. A way station is near. Relief washes over you in the smallest of ways, not a smile, not a sigh, but the gentle release of tension in your shoulders. You are close now, perhaps half an hour more, perhaps less. You press your heels lightly into your horse's sides, urging it forward, though not too fast. You've lost horses that way before, pushing too hard when the end seemed near. At last, you see it, a low shape against the land, barely distinguishable from the hills. A light flickers once briefly, then gone as if someone inside has lifted a curtain, looked out, then let it fall. You approach without calling out, knowing the guards will already have seen you. These stations are trained to expect riders at all hours. They do not question your arrival. They only judge whether you're expected and whether you carry the right seals. As you dismount, your knees buckle slightly before holding. You tie the horse with numb fingers and approach the doorway. The wooden slats creak underfoot, and the smell of cooked barley becomes stronger. A man opens the door without a word, holding a candle in a clay holder. His face is lined and unimpressed. He steps aside, and you enter. The warmth inside is modest, but welcome. There is a stove in the center of the room, made from packed clay and ringed with stones. A fire burns low within it, casting a reddish glow across the walls. Another courier sleeps in the corner, wrapped tightly in a blanket, his back to the room. You nod toward him, then present your satchel to the station master. He opens it with practiced care, examines the seals, then gestures toward a low bench near the stove. You remove your cloak and sit, stretching your hands toward the warmth. Your legs throb, your eyes ache, but you are quiet, as always. You say only what is needed. You drink the hot water you are offered, eat the millet cake that crumbles softly in your mouth, and listen to the faint creaks of the building settling around you. In an hour, you will sleep on a straw mat beneath a felt blanket, with your boots nearby and the message tucked beneath your arm. You will not dream. Couriers rarely do. The road takes those dreams and replaces them with dust and wind, silence and cold. And in the morning, before the sun rises, you will ride again. You rise long before your body is ready, pulled not by urgency, but by the quiet rhythm of necessity. The air inside the station is still and cool, touched faintly with the lingering smell of last night's ash and boiled grain. You shift beneath the stiff layers of blanket, muscles reluctant, knees slow to bend. The straw beneath you crunches quietly as you sit upright, stretching sore arms and rolling your shoulders to shake off the dull ache that has settled into every joint. Around you, the station is still asleep if it ever truly wakes. The other courier has not moved, still bundled tightly in the corner. A pair of guards doze near the entrance, heads bowed against the cold breeze that sneaks in through the roof seams. It is always colder indoors when the fire goes out. You eat what little remains of the millet cake and drink the last of your warm water. There is no time to linger. The message must move. You fasten your cloak, now stiff with frost again, and gather your few belongings no more than a knife, a waterskin, a scrap of jerky tied in cloth, and the satchel, always the satchel. The new horse waits outside, tethered loosely beneath the overhang of the station's outer wall. It's a dark mare with a thick coat and narrow haunches, built more for speed than stamina. You note, not ideal for the terrain ahead, but you will manage. You always do. The sky remains dark as you mount, the first signs of dawn barely visible as a silvery smudge near the horizon. The station master nods as you pass, his expression unreadable, then disappears back into the doorway without a word. There is no farewell, no luck wished, no ceremony. The road does not encourage sentiment. You ride on horse and cloak, melting into the pre-dawn gray, the station vanishing behind you like all the others, nameless, forgettable, a dot on a path too long to trace. The day stretches ahead, wide and unknowable. The terrain becomes more rugged as you move eastward, the plains breaking into low hills, the wind funneling through them with keener teeth. Every ascent requires a lean forward, your weight shifting over the horse's shoulders. Every descent demands care, a slowing of pace, your eyes sharp for loose stones and icy patches hidden beneath dry moss. The sky lightens slowly. Clouds drift in from the north, heavy with the promise of late snow, though it's already deep into the riding season. Snow this late is unwelcome. It lingers in patches and hides dangers, holes in the road, hidden brush, the broken remains of old carts buried by time. By mid-morning, you pass a ruined yurt, its frame splintered and half swallowed by the grass. A faded banner still clings to one side, the remnants of blue dye visible in streaks against the sun-bleached canvas. You slow slightly, not out of fear but caution. Ruins attract scavengers, both human and animal. You peer into the distance, scanning the hills. Nothing moves. Even the birds seem quiet here. Your horse snorts softly and picks up pace again, sensing your decision. You do not look back. As you ride, you become aware of how little the empire touches the land beyond its capitals. The cities may be filled with marble halls, tiled roofs, and soft cushions, but out here, in the wilderness between posts, there is only distance. No matter how powerful the emperor becomes, no matter how far his armies march, he cannot smooth the ground beneath your horse's hooves, or warm the wind that burns your cheeks. The empire speaks through you, yes, but it does not walk with you. You are its voice, carried on hoofbeats, but the road offers no shelter for messengers. By noon, the clouds thicken, and flakes begin to fall, sparse and light at first. Then, with brewing insistence, you pull your hood tight and lean into the wind, eyes narrowing beneath the rim of your hat. The snow is not yet heavy, but it is deceptive. The cold it brings sinks fast into your joints, and the pathways, faint, begins to disappear. You know this stretch well enough to ride by instinct, but even instinct tires in such conditions. The world becomes a pale blur, edges softened by white, your horse's mane and your cloak both dusted by frost. You press on in silence, your thoughts retreating inward. The long hours drag into one another. You begin to count your breath, to mark the time, a trick you picked up from a station guard years ago. Inhale for 3 strides, hold, exhale for 3, repeat. It quiets the mind and keeps you from watching the horizon too closely, looking for landmarks that may not come only makes the journey longer. The best couriers know how to pass time without chasing it. Occasionally, you pass other signs of life: a crude wooden cart, half buried in snow, long abandoned, the tracks of goat hooves crossing your trail, the droppings of a herd not far ahead, once a lone figure far in the distance, riding perpendicular to your path, too far to signal and already vanishing into a fold in the land. Friend or stranger, you cannot say. You do not follow. You never follow anyone off your route. That is the first rule of survival on the steppe. Late in the afternoon, the storm abates and visibility improves. The wind dies down and the snow slows to a drift. Your limbs are colder now, and you feel the stiffness setting in. You dismount to walk beside your horse, leading it by the reins, your boots crunching against the hardening surface. The movement helps. Blood returns to your toes, your back loosens, and the world feels more manageable again. You talk softly to the horse, not words of direction, but words of presence. You find it matters, even if only to you. The sun drops lower, though you haven't seen it in hours. Its light filters through the clouds like a memory, casting everything in a gentle, colorless wash. You know from the shape of the land that you are near the third Ridge Plateau, with a narrow path skirting its western edge. The wind will return there. It always does. You remount and press forward, hoping to reach the overhang where other couriers sometimes camp overnight. A circle of stones there marks an old fire pit, and the wall of rock provides just enough shelter from the wind to rest without freezing. You arrive by nightfall. The overhang is, as you remember it, unchanged despite the passing of seasons. The fire pit is filled with snow now, but the stones remain in place. You clear a patch of ground with your boots and begin to unpack. There is no kindling, only what you can gather: brittle twigs and dry moss pulled from cracks in the rock. You use your flint to strike a spark, coaxing a small fire into life. It takes time. Everything takes time when you're this tired. The fire burns low, barely enough to warm your hands, but it is light, and it is yours. You sit beside it, legs folded, and eat slowly from your ration pouch. The jerky is tough, the barley cakes dry, but the food is filling, and you wash it down with gulps of near-frozen water from your skin. You don't dare drink it all. Tomorrow's ride may be longer than today's. The night deepens around you. The wind howls occasionally from the higher ridge, but your little corner remains protected. You wrap yourself tightly in your cloak, your back to the stone wall, your eyes fixed on the dying fire. You think of the messages tucked safely in your satchel. Where are they going? Who will read them? Perhaps a general waiting for word of a rebellion. Perhaps a court minister eager for the names of traitors. Or a noblewoman desperate for news of her son, marching under a banner thousands of li away. The contents do not concern you. Your duty ends with the delivery. Still, you wonder, now and then, what would happen if you opened one. Just a glimpse, just a name. But the fear outweighs the curiosity. Imperial law is clear. The message is not yours to know, only to carry. And to carry it well is to be invisible, to be neither praised nor remembered, only expected. Sleep comes slowly. Your body aches in new places. Your face is cracked from cold, your hands stiff, your legs twitching with the memory of riding. You pull your hood lower and close your eyes, letting the fire's warmth touch your cheek. In the quiet, the sound of your horse breathing nearby lulls you. The rhythm of its rest joins the rhythm of your own. The wind continues to howl above, but you do not rise. You are hidden for now. Tomorrow will come soon enough, and with it, another endless day. By the time you leave the overhang the next morning, the fire has gone cold, reduced to a dull scatter of blackened ash and a few curling wisps of smoke that vanish into the dawn. The cold bites harder today, though the wind has calmed. The stillness is unsettling. The air is unnaturally quiet, thick with the kind of hush that precedes something unseen. You mount without speaking, without checking your saddle straps twice like you normally do. The fatigue is heavier than usual, and your body moves on memory, not alertness. Your horse is restless beneath you, not nervous exactly, but impatient. You sense it vaguely in the rhythm of its gait, the way its ears twitch toward distant sounds, the slight resistance in its first steps. You press forward anyway. There is no time to linger. The message must keep moving, always moving. The trail is difficult to follow today. The wind in the night has swept across the ground, erasing the faint paths laid by those who came before you. Even the hoofprints of your own mount, pressed into snow the evening before, have vanished beneath a new crust of powder. You ride more slowly, scanning the terrain with trained eyes, picking out the familiar shape of a rise you remember from last season, a dip in the earth where a dried stream crosses the road, a tree that leans oddly westward as if listening to the silence. But these markers are subtle, easy to miss when your mind is dull and your limbs stiff. You wrap your scarf tighter and breathe through your nose, letting the sting of cold air wake your senses. The satchel is still strapped against your waist, pressed tight to your body beneath your outer cloak. The seals remain unbroken, the weight of the messages still evenly distributed. You've checked them more times than necessary since leaving the station. There was the original scroll wrapped in oilcloth, sealed with the black wax of a northern noble house hand. The additional pouch received 2 nights ago, marked in red lacquer and bound with silk twine, more delicate than most. Both remain untouched for now. You begin the climb toward a narrow pass around midday, the kind of pass that turns gentle hills into sudden walls, where the terrain constricts into a funnel between 2 ridgelines. It's not steep, but it's slow, and the snow has begun to melt here, turning the ground beneath your horse's hooves to slush. You dismount again, more out of habit than strategy, leading the horse by the reins, boots sinking slightly into the freezing muck. Each step sends a jolt up your spine, your legs dragging, your mind focused only on the pull of the satchel and the rhythm of breath in your ears. It is here, somewhere between the base of the pass and the tree line ahead, that the mistake happens. But you do not know it yet. Not at first. When you remount again, near the top of the slope, the wind returns. Not a violent wind, not a cutting one, but persistent. A wind that curls around your shoulders and seeps into your sleeves. A wind that scatters snow across the path and lifts stray strands of your horse's mane into the air like smoke. You ride onward, unaware that your satchel feels slightly different against your hip. Not dramatically, just subtly. A lightness that does not register at first. A loosened edge that your cloak flutters across. You do not feel it. You do not hear the quiet sound it makes, the brief whisper of parchment sliding free, the rustle of oiled cloth catching a gust of wind and lifting gently over the edge of your saddle, the sound of a message escaping the world of human hands and returning to the earth. You ride for another hour before the sense of wrongness begins to settle into your bones. It isn't immediate. It begins as a simple doubt, a vague memory of the satchel's weight feeling slightly off when you adjusted your cloak. A second of hesitation when your hand passed over its shape and didn't quite find what it expected. You dismiss it at first, assuming it is fatigue or imagination, but it returns a few minutes later, stronger this time. You reach beneath your cloak, fingers stiff from cold, and press the flap open. The main scroll is still there. You feel it, wrapped tight and thick with wax. But the pouch, the smaller silk-bound one, is not. You stop your horse with a hard tug, dismount immediately, and drop to one knee in the snow. Your hands move quickly now, numb but frantic in their motion. You unfasten the satchel fully, reach inside, pull everything out. The scroll, a crumpled wrapper, a strip of oilcloth, nothing else. The pouch is gone. You do not speak. You do not curse or gasp or fall to your knees. You simply freeze. Your breath clouds the air in front of you. Your fingers tremble. The satchel hangs open like an empty mouth, and the wind, once faint, now sounds louder somehow, as if carrying the distant echo of something slipping away. You close the satchel carefully, methodically, and secure it again against your side. You do not waste time with panic. Instead, you begin to turn the horse around, leading it back down the slope, retracing the path you've just followed. You scan the ground with precision, searching for any hint of color-red silk against white snow. A patch of oiled fabric among the brush, a crease in the landscape where something might have landed and been buried by wind. You walk for half a mile, then a full mile, your boots heavy, your eyes burning from the strain. But the pouch is not there. It has vanished, lost to the wind, or taken. You stop again at the base of the slope and stand in silence. Your heart beats slowly, heavily. You calculate the possibilities. Could it have fallen farther back? Could someone have taken it? Unlikely. There has been no one else. You would have seen them. You would have heard. There were no signs of struggle, no tracks but your own. Still, you cannot be sure. There are rules for this. You know them. You've been told since your first days as a courier what to do when a message is lost, stolen, or destroyed. You are to report to the nearest garrison. You are to explain clearly and without omission what happened. You are to submit to questioning. You are to hand over all remaining materials, and you are to accept the consequences, whatever form they take. You've heard the stories, of course. Not all couriers return from such reports. Some are sent back to the road, assigned new routes, far from the cities, far from oversight, punished not by death, but by exile into endless movement. Others are relieved of duty entirely, their tongues removed to prevent rumors from spreading, and some simply disappear. You glance up at the sky. The clouds have thickened again, and the light is fading faster than it should. Snow threatens once more, and the wind shifts direction. The road ahead will only grow harder. You look down at your hands, still clinging to the reins. There is dirt beneath your nails, your skin raw from cold. You consider turning toward the garrison. You even picture it in your mind, a wooden building with a stone hearth, men in iron helms, scrolls lined in neat rows behind a lacquered desk. You picture yourself standing before them, satchel open, your voice calm as you admit what has happened. But you do not turn, not yet. Instead, you mount again. You point the horse eastward, toward the next station, the next day, the next night. Perhaps the pouch will be found. Perhaps it will be delivered by another. Perhaps you will say nothing. Perhaps you will run. The message is gone, but the road continues. When you finally reach the garrison, the sun is dipping low behind the jagged horizon. Its dying light spilling soft and pale across the stone walls that loom cold and silent. The heavy gates creak open to admit you, a solitary figure weighed down not only by the satchel at your side, but by the invisible burden of what is lost. The cold air here carries a dampness that seeps into your bones, mingled faintly with the smell of old leather and burnt oil. Soldiers stand along the ramparts, their faces set in hard lines, eyes alert though their movements are slow and deliberate. There is no welcome for a messenger who comes bearing absence. You are led through winding corridors that smell of dust and damp stone, the flicker of torchlight casting tall shadows on the rough walls. Each step echoes in the hollow silence, marking time like the slow beat of a distant drum. You pass tapestries faded with age, their colors muted to soft ochres and grays, depicting scenes of battles long past and hunts in sprawling forests. Yet here you are, caught in a moment far quieter and infinitely heavier, a moment that will mark the rest of your days. At last, you are brought before a small, windowless chamber, its heavy door barred with iron and marked by the fading insignia of the Khan's own guard. The room is stark, just a wooden table, scarred with the marks of countless interrogations, and a single lantern flickering weakly, its light dancing across the cracked plaster walls. The air is thick and still, the silence pressing close, as if it could weigh down your very breath. For a long moment, you are left alone, the silence filling the space with its unyielding presence. Your hands rest on the rough surface of the table, fingers tracing the worn grain absent-mindedly. You think of the long miles you have ridden, endless hours in biting wind and snow, the distant hum of other couriers moving tirelessly along their routes. You remember the cold overhang where you sought shelter, the fire's dim glow, the restless horse waiting patiently at your side. All those moments have led to this quiet room, this pause before judgment. The door opens softly, and a figure steps inside, a man, clad in simple but well-made robes, his eyes sharp and unwavering. He carries no weapon, but his presence commands the room with a quiet authority. Without a word, he sits opposite you, folding his hands calmly upon the table, his gaze steady and expectant. There is no ceremony, no preamble. This is the business of the empire, efficient, unfeeling, and absolute. The questions begin, slow and measured, like the unfolding of a scroll in the hands of a scholar. Where had you been on the morning of the 12th day of the 9th moon? Which stations did you pass? What messages did you carry, and for whom? You answer carefully, your voice low and steady, recounting the path you took with precision, the winds you battled, the terrain you crossed, the moments when your horse stumbled or the snow obscured the way. You describe the weather, the station's silence or bustle, the brief glimpses of other riders, all woven into a tapestry of fact and memory. When the question of the missing pouch arises, the room's atmosphere shifts imperceptibly but unmistakably. Your breath catches for just a moment, but your voice remains calm as you recount the moment you discovered the loss, the searching through snow and brush, the empty space where the pouch should have been, the futile attempts to recover it. You speak only what you know, careful not to add speculation or emotion. The man listens without expression, his face a mask of neutrality, weighing every word with silent judgment. Hours pass in this exchange, each question and answer slow and deliberate. The lantern flickers, casting shifting shadows on the walls. the cold seeping through the cracks. Outside, the world continues on, unaware of the small chamber where your fate is quietly being sealed. After the questioning, you are taken to a larger room where several officials sit behind desks piled high with scrolls and inkpots. Their eyes are tired but vigilant as they pore over records, muttering in hushed tones. You wait quietly in a corner, your cloak drawn tight, your satchel tucked close and always within reach. The weight of uncertainty presses down, heavier than the cold stone beneath your boots. One official, younger and sharpened, approaches to ask further questions about your knowledge of the messages, contents, suspicions of foul play, and your prior service. You answer honestly, aware that every word may be scrutinized and recorded. There is no hint of mercy in his tone, only the steady voice of duty. You feel the enormity of the Empire's gaze resting upon you, its power as vast and unyielding as the endless steppe. Days pass, marked only by the slow shift of light through barred windows and the distant clang of metal on stone. Meals come and go, simple and sparse, barely warming your body against the chill that has settled deep into your bones. Sleep is elusive, broken by dreams filled with drifting scrolls and fading voices. The isolation is oppressive. Your thoughts turn inward, retracing every detail of the journey and the loss, every step that led you here. Guards come and go, bringing questions or commands. Sometimes you are left alone with your thoughts, with the memories of miles ridden under icy skies and the steady rhythm of hooves against the earth. The Empire feels distant here, yet all-consuming, its judgment slow and inexorable. You think of the couriers who came before you, their faces faded into history like footprints in the snow, their sacrifices unrecorded but no less real. You wonder how many have faced this silent reckoning, punished not with sword or fire, but with invisibility, exile, or disappearance. The road is unforgiving, and the Empire even more so. Eventually, the questioning ends, though no verdict is spoken aloud. The weight of their judgment hangs in the air, heavy and unspoken. You know that you will not ride the same routes again. Your trust is broken, your name marked in the records. The road behind you closes, replaced by one that is slower, lonelier, and unremarked. You receive new orders service at a remote outpost, carrying lesser messages, living in quiet obscurity. The Empire has not forgotten, but it has decided your fate. It is a sentence without sound or fury, but with consequences just as enduring. You gather your few belongings, your satchel lighter, your steps heavier. As you step outside, the cold wind greets you, indifferent and constant. The road stretches on long, uncertain and waiting, and you ride on. The days that follow your arrival at the distant outpost stretch endlessly, like the steppe itself, vast, quiet, and unforgiving in their persistence. This place is a far cry from the hurried stations and bustling garrisons, where you once delivered your messages under watchful eyes and urgent orders. Here, time moves slower, measured in the drifting of clouds and the faint rustling of dry grass, rather than the clatter of hooves or the whisper of scrolls. Your new assignment is not a reward, nor a reprieve. It is a sentence handed down in silence, a slow exile meant to remind you that every misstep carries a cost in this vast empire. The outpost is a small cluster of stone buildings arranged around a dusty yard, bordered by sparse stands of wind-bent trees and low hills that roll into the horizon. The walls, made of rough-cut stone, stand stoic, against the biting wind that sweeps endlessly across the plains. Inside, the scent of damp earth and aged wood mingles with the faint aroma of smoke from a hearth that barely warms the chilly rooms. The people here are few and wary soldiers with lined faces weathered by years of isolation, clerks who move deliberately through their duties, and locals who watch with cautious eyes from beyond the palisades. You are an outsider among outsiders, a ghost in a place that time seems to have forgotten. Your horse, once a lively companion, spirited and eager, now walks with a slower gait, its breaths misting in the cold air, eyes dimmer from the lack of challenge. Each morning, you prepare it with careful hands-cleaning hooves, brushing its coat, checking harnesses, and the routine is both balm and burden. This steady ritual reminds you that life moves on, even when purpose is lost. The satchel at your side feels lighter, carrying fewer messages and lesser matters, a shadow of its former weight. The scrolls you deliver here are simple reports, requests for supplies, weather updates, and occasionally instructions that ripple out like faint echoes rather than commands that shape kingdoms. Days blur into one another beneath a sky painted in muted grays and soft blues. You rise before dawn, the cold biting at your skin beneath your layered cloaks, and ride short distances along dusty paths that wind through scrub and rocky outcroppings. Your mount's hooves kick up little puffs of dust, the only sound in an otherwise still world. The usual urgency that once propelled your journey has faded to a dull ache, a slow pulse in your chest that reminds you of a life once lived at a furious pace. Here, the air holds the scent of dried herbs hanging from rafters, mingled with the faint musk of animals and the earth's dry breath. Occasionally, other riders pass through messengers from distant posts, traders moving cautiously between settlements, officials inspecting the far reaches of the empire's grasp. Their eyes flicker with curiosity, suspicion, or recognition. They ask questions, politely, but with an edge. How fares the road? Any signs of unrest or trouble? Have you seen anything out of place? You answer in measured tones, giving only what is necessary, the practiced stillness in your voice hiding the unrest beneath. The loss of your message has marked you, and the Empire's eyes remain sharp even here, in this remote edge of its realm. The days grow colder as the seasons shift, frost frosting the edges of leaves and grass, and the wind howling longer at night. You learn to find small comforts of fire's crackle, a bowl of warmed broth, the steady warmth of your horse's flank pressed beneath your hand. The silence here is profound, deeper than the quiet of any station you have known, filled not only with absence, but with a weight that presses on your soul. You find your thoughts circling endlessly around the lost message, what secrets it carried, whose fate depended on its delivery, and what might have unfolded in the hours and days after it vanished. At times, you visit the village on the outskirts of the outpost, a scattering of stone cottages with thatched roofs, where locals move about their daily chores with quiet determination. They live by the cycles of the earth, tending small fields and herds, their lives shaped by the land and the winds. You watch from a distance as an elder performs a ritual at twilight, laying stones in a circle, whispering prayers to unseen spirits, offering small tokens of cloth and grain. It is a silent communion with forces older than the empire itself, a reminder of the unseen world that hums beneath the surface of everyday life. You do not join, but you feel the presence of these ancient beliefs, fragile but enduring. One evening, As the firelight flickers low in your modest quarters, there is a soft knock at your door. An elder from the village, his face weathered and kind, steps inside, carrying a small bundle wrapped in woven cloth. Without a word, he offers it to you, a collection of dried herbs, woven charms, and small tokens meant to protect travelers from harm and unseen dangers. You accept with a nod, gratitude mixed with a quiet skepticism. Yet the weight of this gift settles over you like a gentle shield, a connection to a world where faith and fate intertwine. Nights here are long and often restless. Beneath the endless canopy of stars, you sit alone outside your quarters. The fires glow, casting warm pools of light against the darkness. The wind hums softly through the trees, carrying with it whispers from distant hills and forgotten places. You trace constellations with tired eyes, letting your mind drift across the expanse of sky and earth, feeling the vastness press gently against your thoughts. Sometimes you imagine the scroll you lost, unraveling like a thread caught in the breeze, slipping away into oblivion. Other times, you think of the couriers who came before you, men and women swallowed by the road, their names forgotten, but their sacrifices woven into the silent history of the empire. You write letters never sent, messages never delivered, in the quiet moments before sleep. You ponder what might have been if the message had reached its destination. If your path had not faltered, if the wheels of fate had turned differently. These thoughts come and go like shadows, sometimes sharp and vivid, sometimes fading into the soft haze of dreams. Despite the isolation, life continues. Seasons change. The steppe blooms with wildflowers in spring and turns golden beneath the autumn sun. You grow accustomed to the rhythm of this place, the slow passage of days, the quiet companionship of your horse, the distant call of birds riding the wind. The empire's reach here is less absolute, tempered by the wildness that still claims these borderlands. You learn to find peace in the small things, the warmth of the sun on your face, the rough texture of parchment beneath your fingers, the steady beat of hooves on the earth. Yet, beneath it all, the shadow of the lost message lingers, a silent companion to every step you take. It is a reminder that even the smallest failure can echo through the vast corridors of history, altering destinies in ways unseen. You carry that truth quietly, wrapped close beneath your cloak, a weight lighter than the satchel, but no less real. And so you ride on, not toward glory or recognition, but forward, into the slow unfolding of days and nights beneath the endless sky, a solitary figure tracing the faint trails left by those who came before, a keeper of secrets whispered by the wind. Centuries have passed since the great Mongol Empire spanned the vast reaches of Eurasia, carving a network of roads and relay stations that carried messages faster than any other civilization before it. The relentless march of time has softened those once bustling paths. The mighty roads have long since fallen silent, their dust settling into the earth, and the winds of the steppe have swept over the scars of countless journeys. Now, where hooves thundered and voices called, only the gentle rustling of grass and the distant cry of birds remain. The empire itself has become legend, its tales whispered around fires, preserved in fragments of old manuscripts, and echoed in the silent expanse of the steppe. But history often leaves behind fragments that survive the relentless passage of time, small tokens and artifacts that become windows into a vanished world. Imagine, beneath the grasses and soil of the vast Mongol plains, a tiny, weathered leather pouch lies hidden, its surface cracked and softened by centuries of exposure to sun, rain, and frost, still carries the faint scent of worn leather, a ghost of the hands that once gripped it tightly. The pouch is no larger than a clenched fist, stitched with care and sealed with the faded imprint of a noble's seal, a wax mark that once conveyed authority and urgency. It is a mute witness to a story lost, a secret swallowed by the earth, waiting patiently to be unearthed. This small pouch, forgotten and buried beneath layers of soil, represents the fragile thread that connects us to the past. Its discovery was a remarkable moment in recent history, the result of painstaking archaeological work on the outskirts of a long-abandoned relay station, a vital waypoint on the imperial messenger routes that once spanned thousands of miles. The team of archaeologists uncovered it almost by chance, their trowels carefully brushing away centuries of earth to reveal fragments of pottery, shards of bone, rusted iron nails, and, most remarkably, the leather pouch. Remarkably, it remained sealed, preserving whatever remnants lay within. Inside, they found remnants of a screwlet's parchment, brittle and fragmented, but still legible to the eyes trained in the delicate art of reading ancient Mongolian script. The ink, faded to a soft brown, held the faint outlines of carefully penned characters. The message was brief, terse even, but it spoke volumes about the political climate of the time. References to troop movements, shifting allegiances, and warnings sent hastily to the court of the Great Khan. It was an urgent communication intended to sway decisions and change the course of events far beyond the desolate steppe. For historians and scholars, this discovery was nothing short of extraordinary. It offered a tangible link to a critical moment in history, a message that had vanished from the record, yet carried the weight of power and consequence. The contents of the scroll challenged some long-held assumptions about the timeline of events during a turbulent period in the empire's expansion, shedding light on secret strategies and subtle shifts in alliances that had previously been shrouded in mystery. The pouch, once lost to time and dust, became a silent key, unlocking doors to the shadowed corridors of Mongol imperial politics. Now, imagine yourself holding that pouch, feeling the worn texture of the leather beneath your fingertips. You sense the weight, not just of the physical object, but of the countless miles it traveled, ridden through freezing mornings, scorching afternoons, and bitter nights. The hands that carried it belonged to a courier, much like you, who braved exhaustion, harsh weather, the threat of bandits, and the ever-present shadow of the Khan's displeasure. The journey of that message was fraught with danger and uncertainty, yet it was entrusted to one who bore the empire's trust and the relentless pressure of duty. As your fingers trace the faded seal, you reflect on the long ride across the steppe, the rhythmic pounding of hooves on hard earth, the sharp sting of cold wind against your face, the distant howl of wolves in the night. You recall the isolated stations where you rested briefly, sharing hushed words with fellow couriers and trading news that sometimes seemed as fleeting as the dust clouds that rose and fell with the wind. You remember the maps, torn and patched, guiding you through vast, featureless plains and treacherous mountain passes. This pouch had been a lifeline, a vessel carrying vital words through a world of uncertainty and shifting power. The pouch's burial beneath the steppe is itself a story etched in silence. Perhaps it was dropped in haste during a sudden attack, or lost in the confusion of a harried crossing. Maybe a horse stumbled, the rider thrown and forced to flee without his precious burden. Or the courier, weary and worn, hid it to protect its contents from falling into enemy hands, only never to return for it. Whatever the cause, the earth claimed it, wrapping the pouch in a quiet embrace for centuries to come. Beneath the soil, the pouch rested alongside forgotten shards of pottery, rusted horse fittings, and fragments of woven cloth, each telling their own stories of life, on the road stories of fleeting rest, whispered prayers to wind spirits, and the unyielding rhythm of survival. The discovery site itself was once a vital nexus where messengers changed horses, passed along secrets, and glimpsed the vast machinery of an empire that moved with astonishing speed and efficiency for its time. This small artifact invites you to reflect not just on the tangible, but on the invisible, the human lives behind the empire's grand narratives. The couriers who carried messages were the arteries of communication, yet their names often faded into oblivion. Their sacrifices hidden beneath the weight of history's broader strokes. The pouch connects you to that unseen world, a world of endurance and quiet heroism, lived far from the grandeur of the Khan's court. The earth itself becomes a silent storyteller. Each grain of soil holds traces of footsteps and hoofbeats, faint echoes of conversations and prayers whispered to ancestors and nature spirits. These layers of earth preserve the subtle interplay of power, faith, and survival, inviting you to listen closely to the soft murmur of history beneath your feet. In this moment, you are drawn into the slow unfolding of time, where a forgotten leather pouch becomes a bridge between past and present, inviting contemplation of the delicate threads that hold history together. The object carries the weight of untold stories and lost voices, beckoning you to imagine the lives of those who rode before, the dangers they faced, and the quiet persistence that kept the empire's heart beating through endless miles and countless trials. As you settle into the rhythm of this ancient tale, the vast steppe stretches around you once again, the wind soft and steady, carrying with it the faint scent of dried grasses and distant rains. The road is silent now, but the stories it holds continue to whisper in the breeze, waiting to be heard by those willing to listen. The journey of that small leather pouch did not end with its unearthing from the steppe's dusty embrace. Rather, it marked the beginning of a new passage, slow unfolding across time and space that bridged centuries and continents, connecting a forgotten moment to the present day with delicate, patient care. As scholars and archaeologists took the fragile artifact into their hands, they began peeling back layers of history and meaning that had long been buried beneath the vast Mongol plains. The discovery site itself was a silent witness to centuries of change, where once the pounding of hooves had echoed ceaselessly across the land. Now only the soft whisper of wind through waving grasses filled the air. The long-abandoned relay station had crumbled into earth and stone, its wooden structures rotted away, leaving only faint impressions and scattered remnants for those who would come centuries later to listen closely to the whispers of the past. The pouch lay beneath this quiet scene, hidden beneath a patch of hardy steppe grasses, preserved by the dry, stable soil that had cradled it so patiently. Handling the pouch required extraordinary care. Its leather, though softened and cracked by the centuries, still bore the faint imprint of the courier's touch, the careful stitching, the worn edges softened by countless rides across harsh terrain, the faded wax seal that once spoke of noble authority and urgent purpose. Each feature told a story, not just of the courier who carried it, but of the countless others who traveled these roads, riding through blinding storms, scorching heat, and freezing nights to carry the empire's lifeblood, its messages. Inside the pouch, nestled among fragments of brittle parchment, the scroll was painstakingly unrolled by conservators in softly lit laboratories far from the steppes' vast openness. The delicate ink, faded to a sepia tone, revealed the careful strokes of a practiced hand. A courier who had written swiftly and with intention, knowing that each word could alter the fate of kingdoms. The message spoke of troop movements and looming threats, of political intrigue and fragile alliances, a snapshot of a world balanced precariously on the edge of war and diplomacy. For historians, this fragile message offered a new perspective on the delicate web of power that bound the Mongol Empire together. Previously held assumptions about the timing and nature of certain key events began to shift as the implications of this lost communication took root. The scroll suggested that crucial intelligence reached the Khan's court later than previously thought, possibly contributing to decisions made in uncertainty or haste. These revelations painted a more nuanced picture of an empire that, for all its might and speed, was vulnerable to the fragile realities of communication and human error. The ripple effects of this discovery extended beyond academic circles. It highlighted the perilous existence of couriers, whose lives hung in balance every day as they navigated treacherous terrain, hostile forces, and the ever-present scrutiny of imperial authority. Failure was not merely a personal loss. It could reverberate across vast regions, altering the course of battles and the fate of entire peoples. The leather pouch became a symbol of this precarious duty, a testament to the countless riders who risked everything to carry words that shaped history. In quiet study halls, lined with aged books and manuscripts, experts labored to translate and interpret the message, their work meticulous and slow. Ancient Mongolian script, a language that once flowed readily from the pens of scribes and couriers, demanded careful decoding. Each character, stroke, and curve held significance, a puzzle piece fitting into the broader mosaic of the empire's story. Alongside the textual work, maps were redrawn and routes retraced, imagining the arduous journey the courier had undertaken, the shifting landscapes, the changing seasons, the isolated outposts where brief respite was found before riding on into the unknown. Preserving the scroll was a delicate task. Conservators employed gentle methods to stabilize the fragile parchment, treating it as both a historical artifact and a messenger from a distant past. The document was carefully mounted and encased, protected from the very elements that had once threatened to erase it. Now displayed under glass in a quiet museum space, it serves as a bridge between eras, inviting modern viewers to connect with the lived realities of a courier's life. Yet the true significance of the pouch and its message lies not only in their material existence, but in the invisible lives they represent. Behind every imperial decree, every military maneuver, every political alliance, there were the couriers, the unsung bearers of news, commands, and secrets. Their journeys were fraught with hardship, the biting cold of dawn rides, the suffocating dust of dry plains, the gnawing hunger and exhaustion that stalked their steps. They lived on the knife's edge between duty and danger, their very survival tied to the fragile trust placed in them by distant rulers. The soil that concealed the pouch also cradled countless other stories, stories of survival, faith, and endurance. Beneath the soft grasses and loose earth lie the echoes of footsteps and hoofbeats, the faintest traces of whispered prayers and hurried conversations. The steppe itself becomes a silent archive, its layers preserving the memory of lives lived in the service of an empire that once stretched from horizon to horizon. As you imagine the vastness of the steppe stretching endlessly beneath a soft sky, you can almost hear the gentle rustle of grasses and the distant cry of a lone bird carrying the whispers of the past across the wind. The leather pouch, once lost but now found, symbolizes the resilience of memory and the enduring human need to connect across time and space. It invites reflection on the fragile threads that hold history together. Threads woven not only from the grand deeds of emperors and generals, but from the quiet perseverance of those who rode the roads unseen. In this tranquil moment, as the breeze brushes softly through the tall grasses, you are invited to listen to the silent stories carried by the earth, to the voices of couriers long gone, and to the gentle unfolding of history itself. The message, once lost beneath the soil, now speaks anew, guiding you through the endless, peaceful journey across the vast whispering steppe. The Mongol steppe stretches endlessly beneath a sky that changes with every passing hour, sometimes pale and soft, sometimes sharp and brilliant, sometimes cloaked in the drifting silver mist of early morning. It is a vast open world where the horizon melts into the distance, where grasses ripple like waves across the earth, and where the wind is both a companion and a force to be reckoned with. For those who lived and traveled here, especially the couriers racing tirelessly between distant outposts and imperial courts, the natural world was alive with meanings that went far beyond what the eye could see. The steppe was not only a physical landscape, it was a spiritual one, rich with invisible forces, ancient beliefs, and unseen guardians. Imagine yourself waking before dawn inside a felt-walled yurt pitched on the edge of a small camp. The air is crisp and carries the faint scent of damp earth, mingled with smoldering wood smoke. Outside, the world is quiet, except for the soft murmur of voices, in a language both old and sacred. Voices rising and falling in rhythmic chants that call upon the spirits of the wind, the ancestors, and the land itself. These prayers are gentle, almost like lullabies sung to the world in invocation of protection, guidance, and peace. The flames of a small fire flicker low, casting warm, dancing shadows on the felt walls, as elders sit in a circle, their faces calm and serene in the early morning light. The wind on the steppe is more than a simple breeze. It is a living presence, a spirit that moves freely across the plains. Sometimes a soothing caress, and sometimes a wild, howling force that can whip dust into clouds and flatten tents in moments. Couriers and travelers learned early to respect this invisible power. The wind was believed to carry messages from the spirit world, to be the breath of ancestors, and to hold the power to shape fate. Before setting out on a journey, riders might pause to leave small offerings at crossroads, on hilltops, or beneath ancient trees, bundles of dried herbs, feathers, or horsehair tied carefully with thin leather strips. These offerings were silent prayers for safe passage, for strength against exhaustion, and for protection from unseen dangers that lurked in the vast emptiness. Ancestor worship was woven deeply into the daily life of the Mongol people, especially among those who spent their lives moving through the steppe's endless expanse. Before mounting their horses each morning, couriers would often face the rising sun, bowing their heads in quiet greeting to the spirits of their forebears, those who had ridden these same roads, braved the same cold nights, and faced the same dangers. The bond between living and dead was strong and unbroken, a continuous thread of presence and guidance. It was believed that ancestors watched over the living, offering protection, wisdom, and even subtle signs during the most perilous parts of a journey. Beyond the reverence for ancestors, the Mongols believed deeply in the power of omens and signs, a language of the world spoken through subtle shifts and fleeting moments. Couriers learned to read these messages as carefully as they read the stars or the terrain ahead. The flight patterns of birds, the shape of clouds drifting across the sky, the way shadows fell at duskage, could carry warnings of coming storms, threats, or fortune. A sudden chill in the air might be felt as a breath of spirit. A scattering of leaves could portend change, and a strangely shaped rock might be a marker left by those who came before. These signs were neither frightening nor mystical in a dramatic sense, but rather quiet guides that urged attentiveness, patience, and humility. Picture yourself riding through the steppe, the vastness around you shifting softly with the wind. The grasses bow and sway like a slow ocean, and the air carries the faint scent of wildflowers and fresh rain. The sun warms your back as you follow a narrow dirt path, worn smooth by generations of horse hooves. Suddenly, the breeze carries a whisper not in words, but in sensation, a subtle shift that causes you to pause. Nearby, a small shrine made of stone and wood, weathered but cared for, stands silently on a low rise. You dismount, tying your horse's reins gently, and step forward to leave a simple offering, a feather found on the ground, smooth and white, or a polished stone with traces of red ochre. This act, humble and quiet, is a connection across time, a moment of respect and hope, a wish for safe passage on the road ahead. As evening falls, the sky deepens into a velvety black, scattered with countless stars that shine like tiny fires in the darkness. The campfires flicker softly, sending spirals of smoke upward, blending with the night air. Around these fires, stories come alive, tales of skywolves who run across the heavens, guardians who protect travelers, sacred rivers that carry the prayers of the living to distant mountains, and spirits who ride unseen alongside the living, watching and guiding. These stories are not simply myths, they are lessons, reminders of the unseen forces that shape the world and the courage required to journey through it. The presence of these beliefs brings a subtle comfort, a quiet strength to those who carry messages across the vast, often lonely steppe. The feeling of being watched over, of being part of a larger, timeless cycle, settles softly on the heart. It is a rhythm that moves with the wind and the stars, a gentle melody that accompanies every gallop, every pause, every breath. In this way, the spiritual and physical landscapes are intertwined, creating a rich tapestry of life on the steppe. The wind that lifts dust into the air is also the breath of spirits. The endless horizon is not only a challenge to endurance, but a sacred space where the living and the dead meet. Every journey is both a physical crossing and a passage through unseen realms, where faith, as you settle into this rhythm, feeling the soft pulse of the earth beneath your horse's hooves and the steady beat of your own heart, you become part of a long line of travelers who have looked to the sky, listened to the wind, and trusted in the unseen. The steppe, with all its vastness and mystery, becomes a place not just of hardship and survival, but of connection and quiet wonder. In this stillness, under the vast dome of sky, the spirits of the wind and ancestors whisper softly, inviting you to rest, to reflect, and to be carried gently into dreams. The endless plains, the soft rustling grasses, and the flickering stars above all come together in a lullaby of history and belief, soothing the mind and calming the soul. As dusk settles slowly over the vast Mongol steppe, the world softens under the gentle light of the fading sun. The sky deepens from soft pastels of peach and lavender to the deepening blues of early evening. Scattered with the first twinkling stars, the air cools delicately, carrying the scents of wild grasses, earth warmed by the day's sun, and faint wafts of smoke from distant campfires. In this peaceful hour, the rhythm of the steppe slows, inviting all who roam it, nomads, couriers, and travelers alike, to pause and listen, not only to the whispering winds, but to the quiet murmurs of the spirit world that has long been woven into the fabric of this land. Imagine yourself arriving at a modest encampment, pitched upon the gentle rise of a grassy hill that rolls endlessly into the horizon. The yurts stand clustered in a circle, their felt walls glowing softly in the flickering light of campfires. Around the fire, figures gather in the cooling air, wrapped in furs and woolen cloaks, their faces lined with wind and sun. The murmur of voices drifts on the breeze, prayers, songs, and the telling of stories passed down through centuries. These voices rise and fall in a gentle cadence, weaving a delicate harmony with the crackling fire and the night sounds, the distant howl of a lone wolf, the rustle of grass, the occasional call of a night bird. The rituals performed here are both personal and communal, steeped in reverence for the unseen forces believed to govern and protect the steppe. An elder, revered for wisdom and connection to the ancestors, leads the group in an offering. Small bowls filled with fermented mares, milk kumiyar, poured onto the earth. Sacred libations given as gifts to the spirits of the land, the wind, and the sky. These offerings are acts of humility, acknowledgments of a balance between human life and the vast natural world. Alongside these bundles of dried herbs, wormwood, juniper, and wild timar burned, the fragrant smoke curling upwards as a visible prayer, believed to carry the hopes and wishes of those gathered to the heavens above. Ancestor worship forms the backbone of these spiritual practices. The Mongols maintain a strong, enduring connection with their forebears, believing that the spirits of the departed linger near, watching over the living and offering guidance through the often harsh realities of life on the steppe. Before each day's journey, a courier might turn toward the rising sun, bowing their head in quiet greeting to those who came before. This moment is more than symbolic. It is a heartfelt communication across time and space, a reassurance that one's steps are guided by countless riders who faced the same roads, weathered the same storms, and bore the same burdens. Nature itself is read like a living scripture. Omens and signs appear in the smallest details, the flight of a lone raven silhouetted against a setting sun, the shifting patterns of clouds, the sudden cooling of the wind at dusk. Each of these is noted with care, interpreted by those attuned to the subtle language of the natural and spiritual worlds. For example, a flock of cranes rising in the distance might be seen as a hopeful sign of safe travels ahead, while the sudden silence of birds might warn of an approaching storm or unseen danger. These signs are neither frightening nor mysterious, but serve as gentle guides, reminders that the steppe is alive with forces beyond the physical. Picture yourself riding slowly over a gently rolling hill as the last light fades. The grasses bend rhythmically in the breeze, soft and cool against your skin. Ahead, A simple shrine of stacked stones and wooden poles adorned with strips of cloth stands quietly atop the rise. This place has been tended for centuries by travelers and nomads who believe it to be a sacred meeting point between worlds. You dismount, tying your horse's reins carefully to a nearby tree, and step forward. From your saddlebag, you take a small carved talisman, symbol of a horse, a wolf, or a sacred bird, and place it among the offerings. With a whispered prayer, you ask for protection, for strength to endure the miles ahead, and for the favor of the unseen guardians of the land. As night deepens, the campfire's warm glow becomes a beacon amid the darkness, its flickering light casting long, soft shadows on the faces gathered close. Around this fire, elders share stories that blend history and spirituality, tales of Tengri, the eternal blue sky god who watches over all creation, of the eternal forces that bind the earth and heavens, and of the spirits inhabiting the mountains, rivers, and winds. These stories are neither mere folklore nor entertainment. They are living teachings, passed from one generation to the next, reminding all who listen of the delicate balance between human life and the larger cosmos. Dreams hold special importance in this world. It is widely believed that during sleep, the soul journeys beyond the physical plane, entering the spirit world where ancestors and guardian spirits dwell. Couriers and travelers alike pay close attention to their dreams, sharing them with trusted companions upon waking. A dream of a swift horse may signify endurance and success. A shadowy figure might be interpreted as a warning of hidden threats. These nocturnal messages guide decisions and provide comfort, weaving the spiritual realm into the practical realities of life on the road. The steppes' openness, with its endless horizons and wide skies, becomes a sanctuary not just for the body, but for the soul. The wind carries more than scents, and sounds it carries prayers, stories, and the whispers of those who came before. The stars above serve as eternal guides, their quiet light a reminder of the continuity of life and the unseen watchfulness of the ancestors. In these moments of stillness, you feel the gentle pulse of the earth beneath you, the soft brush of cool air against your skin, and the steady rhythm of your breath slowing in harmony with the natural world. The rustling grasses, the crackling fire, and the distant night calls form a calming symphony that eases the mind and quiets the heart. The ancient beliefs and rituals of the steppe ripple gently through time, inviting you to rest within their embrace, to breathe slowly and deeply, and to be carried peacefully into the quiet comfort of sleep. This rich spiritual tapestry, woven through the lives of the couriers and nomads, is a lullaby sung by the land itself. It is a soft melody of connection to ancestors, to nature, and to the mysteries beyond that invites you to close your eyes and drift gently toward dreams under the watchful, star-filled sky. Far from the dusty trails and wind-lashed grasslands of the open steppe, past mountain passes and along rivers that shimmered like silk in the morning light, the Mongol Empire's great cities rose from the earth like mirage, sordidly walled and humming with a quiet tension. These were not cities of chance, but cities of command. Karakoram in its heyday, and later Shangdu and Dadu, pulsed at the heart of imperial ambition. Within their high walls and carefully measured avenues, a different world unfolded, one wrapped in gold-threaded robes, echoing courtyards, and the soft shuffle of palace slippers against polished stone. Here, behind latticed screens and beneath dragon-painted eaves, Messages arrived, not with thunder, but with reverence, and the men who delivered them passed from the vast openness of the plains into the cloistered hush of imperial might. Imagine the courier who has ridden for weeks without pause through desert windstorms, freezing river crossings, and silent, moonlit forests now, approaching the great southern gate of a walled capital. The city looms above, its walls built not of grass and prayer, but of mortar and control, defended by armed men in lacquered armor. His horse is lean with effort, its flanks streaked with sweat and dust. The rider dismounts slowly, knees stiff and mouth dry, and approaches the gate with a sealed pouch in hand. He bears no sword. He has been entrusted with something far more dangerous in this world, a message for the court. Inside, life follows a rhythm entirely foreign to the wind-swept road. Courtiers rise not at dawn, but at the hour set by the stars and astrologers. They bathe in warm water, scented with petals. They dress in silk that shimmers like the surface of a pond, in robes that denote rank with subtle flourishes, color, embroidery, a clasp of jade. Their days unfold not in miles, but in scrolls and seals, gossip and glances, the slow unraveling of plots and rituals older than memory. Beneath all this softness lies the steel nerve of governance, and no message arrives without stirring ripples, however faint, through the velvet calm. The courier, dusty and sunburnt, waits. He stands in a shaded antechamber, his eyes adjusting to the dim coolness after weeks beneath the sky. Servants bring him water in porcelain cups and a cloth to wipe the dust from his brow, but they do not speak. His presence is a disruption, necessary but temporary. He does not belong here. Soon, a chamberlain approaches, glancing down his long nose at the rider's patched cloak and worn boots. A soft word is spoken, and the courier hands over the pouch. It vanishes into the folds of a robe, and just like that, the message is absorbed into the machinery of empire. But what of those who receive the message? In the halls of power, messages are not read in haste. They are unsealed with deliberation, often in the presence of multiple official scribes, secretaries, advisors. The wax is broken, the ribbons untied, and the script examined for signs of forgery or hidden meaning. Some letters are short, little more than directives. Others are long and winding, reports from the field or diplomatic letters from distant allies or rivals. Each one is handled with care, its every word weighed like gold, for messages were not just words, they were instruments of rule. A general's report from the border might determine whether reinforcements are sent or an enemy is ignored. A grain tally from a far-off province might trigger a change in tax policy. A secret letter from a foreign emissary, concealed within a more mundane pouch, might carry a veiled insult or an unspoken threat. And sometimes the letters brought only silence, the quiet, lingering knowledge that a reply might never come. The palace itself was designed for these exchanges of power. Stone courtyards, painted corridors, carved gates with bronze studs, space carefully orchestrated to reflect the might of the Khan or the local prince. Envoys walked these paths slowly, their footsteps echoing against walls that had seen the rise and fall of ministers and the whisper of secrets traded for safety. In winter, snow drifted against these walls in hushed piles. In summer, the air grew heavy with incense and ambition, while the courier, having delivered his charge, was led to a small room to rest, sometimes rewarded with food and shelter, sometimes sent away with nothing more than a nod. The court carried on. Ministers read and debated, advisors murmured and conferred. Sometimes a single word in a letter sent ripples that moved armies, broke treaties, or changed the life of a man on the far side of the continent. And yet, within the opulence of these halls, there was waiting, endless waiting. The princes and administrators, robed in silk and seated on carved thrones, depended entirely on those who moved across the world beyond their walls. Their knowledge of distant wars, of famines, uprisings, discoveries, and diplomacy of it came second-hand, borne on the backs of horses and the shoulders of exhausted riders. Their power stretched far, but their sight was slow. Imagine the prince who stands on a high balcony, looking to the south for a courier who does not come. Weeks pass. The roads remain silent. Was the message delayed? Was the courier lost? Has an enemy intercepted the pouch? Or worse, was the silence intentional? In this stillness, the couriers became more than messengers. They were lifelines, and they were judged harshly. A delayed letter might be blamed not on weather or wolves, but on disloyalty. A letter that failed to arrive could be considered a betrayal. There were those who disappeared after such failures, summoned to courts they would never leave, punished for silences they did not cause. The court, gilded and perfumed, was a place of great beauty, but also immense danger. And though the couriers who arrived at its gates might only linger for hours, they stepped briefly into a world where the weight of a single parchment could determine the fate of thousands. As the day lengthens and the sun climbs toward its zenith, the rider, now washed and fed, prepares to leave. His next message waits, and with it, another set of roads, dangers, and uncertain destinations. He steps once more into the blinding sunlight, into the noise and dust of the outer city. Behind him, the palace recedes a quiet, velvet-trapped place where his name will not be remembered, though the letter he carried might change the course of empires. Out in the street, traders shout and children laugh. The smell of grilled mutton and sweet tea drifts on the breeze. Life outside the palace pulses with color and sound. But for the courier, this is a brief interlude. The saddle waits, the step beckons, and in the silence of the court, behind carved screens and embroidered curtains, another message is being written. Beyond the echoing courtyards, past the arched gateways guarded by silent, expressionless soldiers in lacquered armor, the innermost sanctums of the Mongol court held a different kind of stillness, more hushed than the open steppe, more careful than a desert trail, and more perilous in its own quiet way. Here, velvet slippers whispered across tiled floors, embroidered sleeves brushed against stone columns, and news hard won, blood-bought, galloped over hundreds of miles, arrived to rooms where time moved not with hooves but with ceremony. Inside these palaces, where silence held authority and power moved unseen, every piece of information, each couriered message, each whisper from a governor, each report from a frontier scout was examined not merely for content, but for tone, for omission, for the glint of hidden meaning beneath official phrasing. And yet, the elegant stillness concealed a growing anxiety that pulsed through the halls like the heartbeat of a giant unseen animal. No matter how tall the walls, how polished the floors, how carefully arranged the screens and silken robes, the palace was only as secure as the letters that arrived through its gates. Imagine a senior scribe hunched over a scroll in a candlelit room just before dawn. His fingers trace the delicate brushstrokes of a message received 3 nights prior, delivered by a courier so exhausted he could barely speak. The wax seal had arrived intact. The document bore the correct phrasing, and yet there was something wrong, a strange formality in the tone, a slight delay in delivery, a section that spoke of rains and flooding but said nothing of grain, nothing at all. The scribe, experienced in these nuances, does not speak of treason or misdirection aloud. Instead, he notes it quietly in his private record, folds the scroll with precise hands, and delivers it to the chancellor. The chancellor, robed in black silk, embroidered with cranes in flight, accepts the message without a word and sets it aside. He will study it later in solitude. What he seeks is not just information, but patterns, the slow, shifting undercurrents that suggest disloyalty, unrest, or shifting alliances far from the center. In these spaces, every word carries weight. There are no accidents. A courier who arrives early may be a hero or a spy. One who arrives late may be dead before sunset, depending on what his letter says or doesn't say. And those who read the letters must do so with not only knowledge of law and administration, but a deep, intuitive understanding of fear, ambition, and human silence. The courtiers themselves often lived in a strange tension. Outwardly, their days were filled with ritual, the changing of robes at midday, the recitation of poetry at mealtime, the observance of seasonal rites, and the celebration of foreign tribute. Inwardly, they remained ever alert to the weight of new messages. A scroll from the western provinces might bring a commendation or a quiet command for dismissal. An update from the southern frontier might trigger the reshuffling of an entire court faction. It was not uncommon for the recipients of such letters, governors, ministers, favored sons, to feign calm upon hearing news, then vanish quietly in the night, replaced before dawn. Some couriers never left the palace after their delivery. Sometimes they were questioned. Other times they were simply absorbed into the city, given a post, or taken in 4 months of watching and whispering, their usefulness extended by proximity to power. And yet, the palace was not only danger and surveillance, it was also a place of contrast. Within these walls, where one man's misstep could end his career, others lounged in painted gardens under plum trees, sipping tea and discussing astrology. Musicians rehearsed in quiet corners. Dancers moved to the soft pluck of stringed instruments. Artisans unfurled bolts of silk, so fine they seemed made of light. Letters that arrived from distant cities sometimes brought not only orders and inventories, but poems, philosophical riddles, even recipes shared between refined minds across great distances, carried on the backs of hardened men. For those who lived inside the court, the world beyond was a concept distant, abstract, painted in words, and shaped by maps inked on parchment. They knew of deserts and floods, of mountain passes and winter roads, but they knew it all through the eyes of the courier, through the words sealed in wax. A famine was not a rumbling belly, it was a single line in a report. A victory was not the blood of soldiers, it was a signature in crimson ink. A rebellion was not fear in the street, it was an urgent scroll delivered at night. This abstraction gave the court its peculiar mood, at once powerful and fragile, omniscient yet blind, surrounded by beauty yet always afraid of the silence between letters. The women of the court, though often hidden behind carved screens and soft curtains, were no less involved in the dance of information. Royal consorts, dowager empresses, noble daughters, they all watched, they heard, they waited. A letter delayed might mean the death of a son in battle. A word left out might mean a change in their household's standing. Their ears were tuned to servants' gossip, to the careful tones of eunuchs who relayed news, and to the rhythms of messages arriving late at night when official voices had gone quiet. Some kept their own informants, minor officials, scribes, even retired couriers who had settled near the city gates. Gifts of silk, poems, or wine might keep a loyal informant's tongue loosened. And in their private chambers, these women often knew more of the world than the men who issued orders because they listened for what was not said. For them, the quietest courier's arrival might bring relief, or ruin. Outside, in the outer halls, there was constant motion. Pages and scribes scurried with armfuls of scrolls. Officials moved in and out of audience chambers, trailing assistants who took notes on thin slips of bamboo or rice paper. Everything was logged, every scroll placed carefully into record. In the great archive school, quiet and lit by paper windows, messages slept in stacks. The voices of hundreds of couriers, thousands of miles, decades of wind and dust, preserved in ink and silence. Yet no matter how many records were kept, the court never truly felt secure. There was always something unknown, a message that hadn't arrived, a pouch that had gone missing, a rider who vanished. There were rumors of letters intercepted by enemies, rewritten by traitors, destroyed by bandits. There were even tales, whispered late at night, of messages cursed by shamans, sealed with spells, carried by birds or wolves instead of men. But mostly, there was waiting. Courtiers waited for news of campaigns. Nobles waited for imperial favor. The emperor, beneath a canopy of silk stars, waited for the world to come to him, one scroll at a time. And while he waited, couriers rode, day after day, mile after mile, across frozen rivers, burning deserts, flooded plains. Their hands cracked from the cold, their eyes stung with dust. They carried words that would be read by fingers that had never held reins, by men who had never seen the step at sunrise. And when the message was delivered, when the seal was broken and the words absorbed, the palace would shift perceptibly but surely. A face might disappear, a policy might change, a soldier might die, a law might be born, all from a letter, all from a courier. As the night deepens over the city, lights blink out one by one behind carved windows. The last fires are banked. The stars shift overhead, silent and bright. In a small outer chamber, a tired courier closes his eyes at last. The road behind him and the palace around him. His journey is over for now, but beyond the city walls, another rider is already on the move. Another message is already flying across the earth, bound for another gilded room where velvet robes rustle and gold ink gleams in the candlelight. And so the rhythm continues, gallop and seal, silence and whisper, distance and command. The court sleeps, the courier rides, and the empire dreams in letters. In the great palaces of the Mongol Empire, whether in the stone halls of Karakoram, the verdant compounds of Shangdu, or the layered courts of Dodu, power was not always wielded through open command. Often it whispered behind screens. It moved in silence. It traveled not in the open hand, but in the sealed pouch, wrapped in red silk or black leather, riding faster than armies and more lethal than blades. In these courts, messages were not merely a method of governance, they were weapons, precision-forged instruments used to elevate, destroy, deceive, or control. The couriers who bore them were not warriors, and yet they rode at the center of imperial conflicts, carrying between saddle and scroll the fate of lords and generals, of princes and rivals, and sometimes even emperors. Imagine a letter that arrives at dusk, the rider silent with exhaustion, his horse foaming and limping from the final gallop through city gates. The pouch is handed to a quiet chamberlain who disappears through polished doors. Hours later, a nobleman is summoned to the imperial audience hall. He goes with practiced calm, dressed impeccably, bowed low. But within that letter, in script barely more than a whisper on paper, there is an accusation, a single sentence, a veiled reference to a land deal in the western provinces, a vague concern about loyalty, a dated phrase echoing a report from years ago. The accusation is not shouted, it is suggested, and that is enough. The prince will not sleep in his bed that night. This was the nature of politics in the courts of the Mongol Empire, particularly during the Yuan dynasty in China, where centuries of steppe traditions collided with layers of bureaucratic practice, Confucian ritual, and inherited dynastic suspicion. The emperors, descended from Genghis Khan, ruled over vast lands with many languages, many traditions, and many enemies, some outside the empire, and some within their own family. Rival factions formed allied between consorts and their sons, between ministers appointed by different clans, between governors of far-flung regions who grew ambitious. And in these contests for influence, the fastest, most effective, and least visible tool was not the sword, but the courier. It was not always what the message said it was when it arrived, who it bypassed, and how it was sealed. Letters were addressed in careful hands, but written to sow chaos or curry favor. A note from a general might contain nothing more than logistical updates. But its promptness, or the fact that it bypassed the chancellor, might signal a new alliance. A single letter delivered at night might tilt the balance of months of silent warfare among factions. Behind the scenes, palace officials jockeyed not only for control of policy, but over the flows of information. The imperial courier office, once merely a logistical marvel of horse stations and route relays, became, over time, something more delicate, a battleground of intrigue. To control who received which letter, when, and how quickly was to control the rhythm of power itself. And so couriers were bribed, delayed, misdirected. Stations that once delivered news about harvests or provincial trade were quietly repurposed to intercept certain letters and prioritize others. There were whispers of high-ranking men maintaining secret courier networks, parallel systems invisible to the official chain. These men operated like shadowcons within the bureaucracy, using messengers as chess pieces. Letters would vanish mysteriously en route. Messages would be delayed by snow despite no storm ever reaching that province. Riders would be redirected under false orders, their maps subtly altered. And when the message finally did arrive, it might contain just enough truth to seem innocent, and just enough poison to be fatal. Even the most ceremonial scrolls, those with golden seals and silk bindings, could contain treachery. A royal invitation to a feast might be a prelude to arrest. A commendation for faithful service might precede exile. Praise, when sent too publicly or to the wrong person, could be more dangerous than criticism. In this world, flattery could implicate, and attention could condemn. Now imagine a young prince, recently elevated, sitting in the cool chamber of his private residence, examining a letter sent from a distant city. The calligraphy is beautiful, the wording polite, but buried in the fourth paragraph, couched in deferential terms, is a subtle reference to an incident one he thought forgotten, a hunting trip in which a minor official had disappeared. The prince had never been questioned. But now the letter reminds him of it. Why? Who sent it? And why now? He rises slowly, leaving the letter on the low, lacquered table. Outside, the cicadas sing. Inside, the silence is heavy. He begins to consider who among his circle might have mentioned the trip, which scribe had access to the old reports, which rival might be seeking to revive the event as a means of leverage. The letter, by morning, will be gone, burned, or shredded, but its damage will linger. These quiet duels took place constantly behind the silk screens and golden fans of the imperial court. Emperors played their sons against each other. Ministers attempted to sideline generals. Advisors sought to defame scholars. And through all of it, the letters moved more swiftly, more surely, and often more fatally than any army. There were even instances of forged messages, so skillfully crafted that entire provinces changed governors based on them before anyone questioned the seal. Once, a courier arrived in the capital with a document bearing the name of a high minister, instructing a change in taxation policy. By the time the forgery was discovered, the changes had been implemented, the markets had shifted, and a rival family had already profited. Such tactics were high risk. If discovered, the punishment was absolute. Not only would the forger be executed, but his family, his scribes, his associates, anyone who had touched the scroll might be purged. And yet, the rewards were great. To remove a rival, to curry favor with the emperor, to reshape policy in one's favor, all without a single sword drawn. And so, hidden within the grandeur of imperial halls, the smell of incense, the scroll paintings, and the songs of zither musicians was a current of paranoia. Couriers, when they arrived, were watched carefully. Their origins, their fatigue, the way they answered questions, it all became evidence. A letter's route might be traced. A delay might be grounds for interrogation. A missing pouch might trigger a full investigation into a province's loyalty. Couriers, in turn, learned to keep their expressions neutral, their thoughts private, and their footprints light. Some were discreet by nature, others were trained, and a few disappeared, entirely silenced not by road hazards, but by the very men who had sent them. To carry a message in this world was to hold fire in one's hands, not because it burned, but because its warmth could attract too much notice. Yet the system persisted, fragile, elegant, and dangerous, at the center of a vast empire where distance could be deadly and silence could be fatal. The messages moved steadily on, across mountain passes and through city gates. They arrived bearing orders, secrets, provocations, and praise. They arrived in darkness and in ceremony, in breathless haste and with studied delay. And each time they did, the palace shifted, ever so slightly, like a massive beast disturbed in its sleep. In these final years of the great Mongol courts, when foreign ministers bowed low and tribute poured in from the corners of the known world, it was not armies that kept the empire balanced. It was not gold. It was not even loyalty. It was paper, ink, a name, a seal, and the hands that carried it. The palace wakes before the city does. In the earliest blue of morning, before birds stir and before fires are lit, attendants move through the darkened corridors like ghosts, lighting lanterns in long succession. The rooms fill slowly with gold and amber light, casting shadows across painted screens, jade inlays, and the carved faces of lions and tigers that watch silently from pillars and eaves. Somewhere beyond the walls, a courier has already passed the outer gates. His arrival, anticipated but unannounced, will tilt the balance of those within. And though he carries only a pouch, that narrow bundle wrapped in cord and dust, it will shape decisions that ripple across an empire. But this is not a tale of one message, not now, at the end. This is a story of hundreds, perhaps thousands of scrolls that have crossed these corridors, each carrying weight greater than their paper could ever suggest. And not all of them, not nearly all, were destined to reach their proper end. Some disappeared entirely. Riders went missing between stations. Others were found long after their messages should have arrived, wandering, injured, or silent unable, or unwilling to say what had happened along the way. Among the most dangerous roles a courier could play was that of the deliverer of news no one wished to hear. A general's retreat, a governor's rebellion, a failed grain harvest, a noble family's betrayal. Such news, once arrived at the seat of power, could not be undone. It could only be received, absorbed like a knife to the ribs end, then acted upon. And sometimes those in power preferred never to hear it at all. So it was not uncommon for a letter, especially one carrying grim tidings, to simply vanish, not lost in the storm, nor waylaid by accident, but intercepted deliberately. A rival faction might stop the scroll before it reached the throne. A minister might bribe a courier to delay. In more brutal cases, the rider might be killed quietly between stations, his message never discovered. In this way, the truth itself could be silenced. Delay meant time, time meant leverage. A truth not yet told was a truth still controllable. Sometimes the silence itself was the message. Imagine the emperor seated on a high dais, his robe pooling at his feet, eyes fixed, not on his advisors, but on the empty space between the columns. He is waiting for a message from the western provinces. It was due 3 days ago, and it has not arrived. Nothing more is said. His ministers avoid his gaze. No one speaks of it openly, but they all know the possibilities. Perhaps the message was delayed by weather. Perhaps the courier fell ill. Or perhaps something worse, rebellion, coup, silence from the West. In a world run by messengers, is not absence, it is a warning. In the days that follow, as the emperor waits, small changes begin to unfold. A request to redeploy troops is quietly denied. A governor's budget is frozen. A scheduled appointment with a provincial envoy is postponed. There is no accusation, and lies awaiting watchful stillness. When the message finally arrives, it will no longer be the first revelation. It will only confirm what has already been suspected. The rider who finally delivers it, if he delivers it at all, may arrive to a very different palace than the one that expected him. Indeed, the longer a courier was delayed, the more dangerous his task became, because in the world of thrones and intrigue, timing was everything. To deliver bad news late was to risk being seen, not as a messenger, but as a conspirator. Even when innocent, a courier might be accused of withholding. The belief in information as power ran so deeply through the Mongol bureaucracy that even neutrality was suspect. After all, to carry the words of traitors even under orders was to touch treason itself. And so, some riders learned to read the letters they carried, not just the physical script, but the weight of them. They learned to recognize when a message was too quiet, too polished, too perfectly sealed. They learned when a scroll might be more than it appeared. A simple logistics update might mask a hidden directive. A general's routine campaign summary might conceal a purge. A congratulatory note to a nobleman might be followed 2 days later by his arrest. The truly seasoned couriers adjusted accordingly. They stopped before each palace gate. They smoothed their robes. They cleared their minds. They delivered the pouch and said nothing. Eyes forward, shoulders square, no reaction. They had learned the hard truth. Once you stepped into the palace with a message, you became part of the message. And some, sensing the danger in what they carried, chose not to deliver at all. There are records faint, fragmentary of riders who vanished along the way. They were never seen again, but sometimes, years later, their pouches turned up, buried in sealed clay jars in abandoned way stations, or tucked beneath floorboards in lonely courier shelters. Their scrolls, unread, still bearing seals unbroken. What fear, what knowledge led them to disappear? Did they think to protect themselves? Or had they realized the enormity of what they carried and known that to deliver it was to bring death? One such letter, found centuries later in a collapsed hut along the Yellow River, was written in careful brushwork and addressed directly to the emperor. Its tone was deferential, its content unremarkable, a governor reporting tax receipts and water levels. But at the end, in a note penned in smaller script and from a different hand, were 3 words: do not trust. No signature, no explanation, just the warning. Who was it meant for? And did the courier know? This is the hidden truth of the great Mongol communication empire. The farther the message traveled, the less certain its meaning became. And in the Game of Thrones, uncertainty was as dangerous. The emperors, for all their power, were not immune to this fear. They too depended on the truth of words delivered from afar. And sometimes, even they sent messages not for clarity, but for effect. A false order sent to a rebellious province, knowing it would be intercepted. A misleading decree sent as bait to identify a traitor. A letter addressed to a son, never truly meant to be read by him, but by the advisors who surrounded him. These messages were crafted like blades, meant not to inform, but to provoke. In this world, the written word could be deadlier than the sword, and it was wielded accordingly. Now, as the empire ages and the world changes around it, new roots forming, new powers rising, this delicate dance of messages and thrones begins to fracture. The system, once so precise, grows overburdened. Corruption creeps into the stations. Riders are underpaid, waypoints neglected, seals are counterfeited. Letters disappear not for intrigue, but for coin. And yet, even in these declining days, the tradition remains. The belief that somewhere, on some cold road at sunrise, a man is riding with a message that will change the fate of a court. Because even as the palace feasts, even as golden flags flutter and children run in tiled courtyards, everyone's servant and prince, dowager and spy listens for the sound of hoofbeats, for the footfall in the outer hall, for the moment when the courier arrives, dusty and unspeaking, and hands over the pouch that will decide what happens next. It is not thunder, it is not drums, it is a message, and sometimes that is all it takes. And so the journey comes to its quiet end. The letters have been delivered, the pouches opened, the horses unsaddled. The fires at the way stations have burned low to coals. The great cities behind their stone gates are still. The court has spoken, or perhaps it has remained silent, as it so often did. Either way, the message has done its work, and the writer is no longer needed. Imagine, now, that same courier, older than he once was. His eyes carry the horizon in their lines. His hands bear the calluses of distant rains. He is no longer rushing, no longer bracing against wind and snow. He is resting now, perhaps beneath the same open sky that once watched him thunder across frozen rivers. Or perhaps beneath a roof, finally, in a quiet village that does not question what he once carried or for whom. Because, in the end, even the fastest couriers are slowed. Even the weight of empires, bound in scrolls and sealed in wax, grows light with time. The palaces they once entered, barefoot and bowed, may be ruins now. The ministers who read their words, long gone. The messages they carried, forgotten or resting still in the archives, yellowing gently, their ink no longer feared or needed. But their journey remains, and it is this rhythm, the tireless forward motion, the endless giving of oneself to a road that offers no guarantees, that stays with us. Not the battles, not the emperors, not even the intrigues. It is the dust and the hoofprints, the quiet exchange of weightless words for unimaginable consequence, the cold wind, the aching bones, the knowledge that the road ahead will be longer still. So now, as the night deepens around you and the world of past centuries folds softly back into the shadows, let yourself rest. You have traveled far tonight, from the wind-blown plains of the steppe to the corridors of velvet-draped power, from shivering dawns on bare earth to the glittering silence of a court that feared the truth carried by a man on horseback. Close your eyes now. Let the echoes of hoofbeats fade. The scrolls are sealed. The palace gates are shut, and the long ride is over. Sleep well.